All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm really glad to talk to you and excited. My colleague Kim is joining us from the Chicago area. And we're here to talk about collaborating with students to build multimodal open education resources. I'm going to have Kim introduce herself. So, Kim, if you want to say hi. Oh, we can't hear you, Kim. We all remember teaching in COVID. No one could ever hear anyone. All right, Kim, while you're getting your mic working, I will say hi, I'm Brendan Riley. I'm an associate professor of English and creative writing at Columbia College Chicago. I'm also the coordinator of our first year writing program, which is the context in which I'm talking to you today. Go
Can
ahead,
you hear
Kim.
me now?
We can hear you. Ha.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Hale. I am the former academic engagement librarian from Columbia College Chicago, and I left in May, this May. So I am working now on this project with Brendan to present this project that I worked on. So I'm so glad to, well, I can't see you all, but I'm glad that you have come to our our program. Back to you, Brendan.
Do you want to see if we can turn Kim up a little bit?
I'm sorry.
Great.
Oh,
Yeah, Kim, we can hear you. It's just a little quiet on our end, so I'm going to have them turn you up a little bit.
okay.
All right. Thank you, Kim. Well, welcome. So today we are going to present a somewhat interactive conversation about working with students to build open education resources. Our plan today is we're going to tell you a little bit about the resource we worked on, which is called Authoring Culture, Foundations of 21st Century Writing is the subtitle on that. We'll talk about the efforts we made to collaborate with students where it worked and where it didn't. And we're going to ask you to be thinking about how you might do the same. So I would suggest that if you took the charge from James and Joy at the keynote yesterday to start thinking about a project you want to work on, I'm going to encourage you as I'm talking today to think about how you might collaborate with students on that project. Not just how they might use it, but how they might help you author it. And in the second half of the talk, we're going to have a little time for you to do a little writing about it, maybe talk to a neighbor about it, and then we'll do a share conversation. So that'll be the goal, and we'll leave a little time for Q&A at the end. So let's jump right in. Oh, I just jumped ahead of myself. So these are the learning objectives we set for ourselves today that you'd be able to articulate how to re-envision curriculum. One of the things we did is the source we're taking is something that existed before, and we rewrote it and reimagined it as an open education resource. We're going to help you learn to anticipate the challenges of working with students on this sort of thing, and then how you might do that yourself. So let me tell you a little bit about authoring culture. If you want to grab this URL or this QR code, this will take you to the text that we're talking about. Authoring culture is a flexible introductory college writing text. We have built it around the idea of having key concepts. So there are 13 ideas in the book that are meant to be sort of foundational notions that you would have for a first year writing program and for being a good writer in general. And then as teachers are teaching out of the book, they're not progressing chapter by chapter, but rather they're choosing the modules or the chapters that work well for them. In our course, for example, we use 8 to 10 of them in a given semester. So students aren't going to encounter all 13. But we're also working with faculty throughout our college to make the language of the key concepts a sort of shared vocabulary so that when a teacher in another class is talking to their student about writing, they're able to talk to them about, say, audience or ethos or circulation, and that would be shared language. All right. So Kim is going to tell you a little bit about how the project came to be.
I wanted to
Good morning.
let
How's it going?
everyone know, and you already know this, that part of the challenge of creating an open educational resource is funding. And as part of my participation on a few committees, I learned about project funding early. So I had a sort of a heads up being part of committees. And this was one of them. The grant that we received was from the University of Illinois System and the Consortium for Academic and Research Libraries in Carly. It was part of a 3-year, $2 million textbook pilot grant that Carly wrote towards the interest of supporting open educational resources in Illinois. And that means creating them, revising them, creating new titles for the collection, not only for the state of Illinois, but also for around the world. Because as we all know, one of the benefits about open textbooks and open products is that they're free and accessible. So that was part of that. The granting agency that Carly made a proposal to was through FIPSI, which was part of the U.S. Department of Education, and Columbia was awarded just over $65,000 for this project. So one of the things we were trying to do was to address the issue of textbook affordability on our campus. We all know this is nothing new, so we're all aware of that, and that's an issue for everyone who wants to create one. To revise and update the current textbook that was already in use in the first year English courses, provide an opportunity for students to participate in a course-related project, including their voices and input. And that's one of the most important things about OER is giving, at least for college students, is to give their voice and input to the project. And then lastly, enable Columbia faculty and the institution to be part of the growing landscape of open education scholarship. So I'll now talk about our timeline. Work began in late fall 22 to assemble grant writing teams and to take on specific roles as if funded. So one of the things that we did was, as we were writing our grant proposal, we talked about the things that were necessary for the grant, but also other areas that we might need to have people participate if it was funded. We applied for the grant in February 2023, received notice of funding in spring 23, and the book revision began in summer 2023. Now, I should say that the chapters were written and revised by faculty in the English and Creative Writing department, but also one of our librarians played a part in the book. Our work was delayed by the part-time faculty strike in the fall of 2023, but work resumed in spring 24. The book was published this summer in August, and we also filed an extension to complete the book and ancillary materials, which are podcasts and videos, and Brendan will talk about that in a bit. And then the final work is now in progress and will be completed by next fall.
All right. Thank you, Kim. I think that's my turn. Back to me. Or at least for a moment anyway. So as I sort of said at the beginning, we're talking about sort of ups and downs of the project. And so we're sort of seeing the next 4 slides that we're going to talk about as kind of a case study of different ways you might interact with students as you're producing this kind of work, and where things succeed and where they don't necessarily go as smoothly as planned. So I think, Kim, you're going to talk about the cover image, right?
One of the things that we talked about as we were developing the book was the cover image. And what we wanted to do was to make sure that students were a part of that. And we did that through having 2 of our library students, our access students, who were both artists, create the cover. So the cover is all Columbia students. They've designed the cover, and also those are 3 Columbia students that are on the cover. And we wanted to make it not only attractive, but we wanted to, again, focus on having students as part of this work. And I think our students did a great job.
Me too. Great. So a couple of the other things that we did as part of the process, we built in student review of the books. We were able to work with students in a variety of ways We had, so the goal was to have, like we did with a peer editor at another institution, to judge its quality as a textbook. We wanted to work with students to say, how is this readable? Is this accessible for you? How useful is it? And so we connected with a faculty member that we knew at another institution who was able to line up a student who used evaluating the book as an independent study project. She was interested in publishing, so we had her read the book and send us comments on it. And then we also looked for students on our campus. We recruited several. We had two who said they would do it and one who actually did do it. So we were able to get one student who actually read the book and sent us feedback on it, and the other student did not. One of the key factors in sort of help recruiting the student work is we did budget into our grant that this would be a paid task. So we aren't asking students to do, the student from the other institution did it as a graded activity, that they were working with a teacher there or a professor there, and the feedback became an activity they were doing as part of their education. On our end, the student who did it, we were offering pay to take the time to do that. And of course, the pay was not separated from how good they said the book was. So we had two other texts that we were working on and are still finishing up. The biggest one and the biggest challenge was videos. So the original vision was that each chapter would have a video made by a student talking about the key concept in language accessible and appropriate to students. My school, Columbia College Chicago, is a performing and media arts school. So all of our students are artists in some ways. They're filmmakers, they're dancers, they're sculptors, they're musicians, everything in between. And so often work in class is built around multimodal production. In first year writing, for instance, it's often the case where we will have a student make a thing in their field and then write about having made the thing. Because that is often how we keep students engaged at our place. And so the original vision was that it'll be easy to get students to do these videos. Great plans, right? So the first pass was as part of their writing classes in the fall, after we wrote the initial draft of the text, was to have students, as part of a project, work on an early version of the video, then polish it up and submit it as part of a contest for which we had a couple cash prizes. The idea would be the best one or three would win cash prizes, and the others would give us what we needed for the book. We had one video submitted, and it was very good, but that was one of the 13 we needed. So that didn't quite get the job done. I hate to make excuses, but this was also, it's a very tumultuous time on our campus. We had a strike going on, so there was everybody was mad and sad. And not to make excuses, but just to sort of set the groundwork. And this is one thing we'll talk about when you are thinking about a project, is leaving in room for unexpected calamity. So the second pass we took on this, we talked to professors in our film department who recommended that since we had money in the budget to pay students, even though it wouldn't be nearly like a good hourly wage, it would be a good sort of project thing, that students doing work for us as sort of like freelance filmmakers, that it would be good practice for them for industry. And we did work with a team of students, and we got one film from them, but summer got in the way, and we got one instead of several. So we are currently working on the next round of recruiting in that method. And we'll see. Check back in at the end of the summer whether we have our videos or not. I'm pretty confident that we will. We're making good connections on that. But that's where we have two of our videos done, quite a few left to do. But a key part of it for us is that because we have a budget, we're able to at least give them a nod toward, you're not just doing this because you want to, that we're giving you some input there. The biggest success in this regard is the podcast series that we did. The way that we approached this project was I partnered with one of our first year writing instructors, Carl Elsoken, and he created one of the projects in his class to have kind of two tiers. One tier was to reflect on and write about one of the chapters. The other tier was to do that and record it as an audio conversation instead of a written piece that they would write notes and kind of plan, but the execution of the project would be audio with the idea that they're participating in a podcast. In order to keep the outside class burden low, because we weren't able to pay these students, Carl and I wrote light scripts for each chapter as an introductory moment, and we recorded those with the help of a student in the radio department. So we had a radio student engineer who recorded us talking about each of the key concepts. And then Carl and his class, he had two students for each chapter. They would record like a 8 to 12 minute conversation about the key concept and how it reflected their particular discipline. And this was the most effective thing we had done in terms of engaging student ideas and getting them developed in terms of how other students could understand them, which is the idea of these ancillaries. So we recorded those. We had them edited together. We worked on finishing them up over the summer. We got some feedback about them that required another round of editing. That's just finished. So they're on our website yet. They'll be attached to the book probably by the end of the month. And we're working on transcribing the podcast now so that they'll be available for people who can't listen to them, right? As scripts as well. The key takeaways that made this really work were because it was done as part of coursework, it wasn't asking an extra burden on students to participate. We figured out a way to have them participate in the course of doing what they were doing already. So it was both a learning opportunity and publication, right? These students are in this podcast now, they're credited as having done this work. It is a line item that they can do, but it had a low outside of class expectation. Depending on what you teach at Columbia, one of the big challenges we have is our students come to our school because they're very passionate about their art and they really want to spend all their time doing their art. But we are a liberal arts education, but part of what you get is you're both an artist and thoughtful about it, right? We're not just an arts academy where you're good at your art and you could figure out the rest on your own. But it often means that if you're teaching one of what I heard in another panel called Gen Ed courses, or we call it the core, that you often have to think about how to engage with students in a way that will help them develop those skills and develop that work. But often homework isn't for our student body a thing that's going to yield a lot of results depending on what kind of work you're assigning. So doing this project with a low outside of class expectation gave us a lot more results in terms of the podcast. All right, so I've sort of talked about this already, but this is where we are. The book text is done and published. It had the student reviews already. It's available for people to use. I will say having a contact at the publishing platform, we're on LibreTexts, was really useful to us because as often thinking about the technology piece, if you're not familiar with the platform, kind of jumping through all the hoops is a challenge. And so having a direct contact there was really good. The cover image is done and published. The podcasts are done and nearly published, and the videos are underway. I think, Kim, were you going to share the lessons, some of these lessons here?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, I learned, I think all of us learned a lot of lessons from this project. And here are some of the ones that we wanted to share, in that the first, regular meetings to keep the groups informed are so important. Communication is probably the biggest part of any project, particularly when like this, where you have multiple plates spinning at the same time. So we need to keep all of our plates, together. You also need clear and consistent communications to meet the important dates and deadlines. You'll have internal deadlines as well as the grant deadlines, and it's important to make sure that they mesh so that you stay on task. One of the things that we also learned was that it's important to define the project roles and responsibilities early in the project. Like the minute that you find out you have been given the grant or given funding, you need to determine who's going to do what, and to determine also the expected time commitment, because not everyone is on the same schedule and some areas will have peaks and valleys. So it's important to make sure that everyone knows what the time commitments are and what they'll be doing. We had a couple of occasions where we had to come together and pick up areas where balls were dropped or things didn't happen as they were planned because of a variety of reasons. So it's important that everybody is communicated with and know their roles. Brendan mentioned earlier to talk about a contingency plan for staffing and other changes because things will happen and sometimes outside of your control. So it's important to be ready uh, to act and kind of perhaps think of things that could happen. You never know what's going to happen. For example, we didn't expect a strike at the beginning of the fall semester. But we banded together and made sure that the project went through and continued. So very glad with how we were able to handle that. Um, Another thing was to is to stay in touch with the funding agency and let them know what was happening. And that's what we did. We let them know that we were having some challenges that we had to deal with. And they were very accommodating to us and very helpful. So that was very appreciative. Um, and also be supportive and accountable to each other through the life of the project. Um, Grants like these can take more than a year. This has been 2 years, and it will um, have changes and have other things happening, but it's important to be supportive with everyone to kind of go through what needs to be done as you're working on the project. And it also helps to be on statewide and local committees on OER because you will find out information that's happening in your state, in your city with OER and other institutions. So that gives you a heads up on possible funding sources or other resources available.
Thanks, Kim. Just highlighting a couple of the lessons from working with students. The things that made it work really well for us is creating low friction opportunities, things where students could participate in the course of other work that they're doing. Having a clear outcome of what you're looking for when students are participating really helps a lot. One of the challenges with both the videos and the book cover that we had was sort of having too loose of guidelines for what we're asking students to do, which resulted in multiple rounds of feedback that would have been shorter had we been more clear from the beginning what we're looking for. And then again, sort of giving students a clear idea of where they're going, kind of constraining the outcome, gives them a sort of clear sense of how to approach it. And then, as with there's been a lot of conversation in the last decade about internships. I think that this kind of work also is a place where you really want to think carefully about when you're asking students to do work for a thing, really thinking about how you're making it worth their time. An example that came up for us with the podcast was really interesting. The students asked about the releases that they had to sign because it's going to be a Creative Commons thing, and asked if we could address the issue of their voices being taken for AI. And we hadn't thought about that at all. And frankly, with Creative Commons, there's no way to say, well, we can't guarantee that won't happen. But we talked with them about it, and they decided to proceed even though we can't guarantee they won't be AIified. But it was useful to us to talk about those concerns. All right. So I wanted to we got about 15 minutes left. I'm hoping to use about 7 minutes on this. I had grandiose plans of 17 minutes to work with. Come on, that's crazy. So I'd like y'all to take just a couple minutes. You can either make some notes or chat with somebody next to you to think about what's an OER project you're working on and how might students help to create that project. And while you're thinking about that, make a note or two about how would you make it worth their time, or present it in a way that makes it attractive for them to participate beyond it's exciting to participate in a thing you're doing, which is not as big a motivation as we like to think it is. So I'm gonna give you 2 to 3 minutes to talk amongst yourselves, and then maybe we'll do a call out and see if we have some shares. Folks who are in the chat, if you'd like to chat in the chat area with other people about what they're working on, and then hopefully we'll be able to see those as well. So let's take like 2 to 3 minutes to talk amongst yourselves, and then we'll hear from how you're working.
I'm assuming that the curriculum is already pretty multimodal. Going in.
The kind of work that the students do, but like no,
Naturally.
very little of the stuff we're giving them.
Sure.
It was literally like an actual textbook that we had published, and about half those chapters came in a heavily revised version that have in the mind. Part of it was we did a lot of work to bring the creative writing faculty in, because most creative writing faculty don't teach first year writing.
Right.
Although that's shifting at our school because economics.
Yeah.
So trying to make their new version something that includes a lot of the expertise of creative writing. Like we have a chapter on story, which we did before, as a way to think about how you approach any kind of thing you're writing, think about story as a structuring mechanism.
Well, I teach a lot of technical writing as well. I think story as a genre, it's really emerged because of social media. Online authors show story conventions that they may take for granted because they're emulating. Fascinating. I like that.
Yeah, technical writing is something, despite the fact that some of our students really need it, we cannot make it go. And we operate only needs it. The only way we can do is like require it and getting new requirements in it.
It's interesting because I almost wonder too if this could be a threat to show the relevance with utility, especially if they are largely in the arts, being able to explain effectively for a variety of different audiences what it is they do and why it's valuable.
Yeah, that's usually our logic for most of the first year writing is like you may have to write a grant, you may have to write the little thing that goes next to your exhibit at the gallery, you have to write notes for programmers, those stuff.
So it's an effective summary of your portfolio.
All right, I'm gonna see. All right, that 3 minutes went super fast. Hopefully you're finding good ways to start thinking about collaborating with students. So I'm curious to hear if anyone wants to share to the group what they are thinking about, or if folks online want to share things. Oh, I see a bunch here. I love the idea of having students review for readability and seeking out students who might have an interest in that area. It's really useful, and I think we don't do that enough, particularly with text you're creating for yourselves. That's great. Do we have anybody in the room who'd like to share?
I think these folks in the back want to share.
Okay. Hi, my name is Matthew. I teach a course on banned books and censorship in the United States. And as you may know, it's a pretty dire situation right now. It hasn't been this bad in 50 plus years. So it's pretty much impossible for me to keep the course like constantly updated. And so in that module, I use Canvas. Basically, I just create a content page for different student groups and tell them to go find a current controversy and create a content page about it. And, they include citations and overview and images, media, stuff like that. And then if I have their permission, I put Creative Commons license on it. And then it's added to the course. So next time I run the course, the next group of students have that opportunity to see it. It doesn't involve necessarily recording videos and stuff, but that's the general idea.
Yeah, that's great. I might suggest as a sort of next step up, I don't know, do you share that course to the Creative Commons so that other people in other institutions can use those modules?
That's the plan.
Okay.
But I need to really vet it first.
Right.
So
right.
and I only teach it one section per year. So it's taken me about 4 or 5 years to actually even collect enough good stuff that I would want to share it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I did hear in another panel that was about intellectual property. If you're going to do any kind of OER work, making sure that the school allows you to, right? Because some schools, they own your coursework, and some schools you own it. You want to make sure you own it before, or get permission before you Creative Commons license the work. I see here, I'm thinking, Sarah Wilhoit says, I'm thinking of co-creating a blog with podcast episodes in my women's and gender studies class. Yeah, I think that that's a really fun idea. A blog with a podcast is an excellent mix of things that students can produce in the form that they find really interesting. If students are good at audio production, they could do that. If they want to produce blog episode or blog posts, they could do that. Maybe there's a back and forth between the two. And I've always been a proponent of having students make things to go out in the world. And so if you just wrap that up with the Creative Commons license and think about how it's going to be distributed, that's really good. Excellent. Any other, maybe do we have one more share from the room? Great.
Hi, so I'm a librarian and I'm also in charge of our student library workers. So I'm thinking about maybe how to get them to work on like mini modules, like how to search, how to evaluate sources, whatever topics they might be interested in. Because some of them really want to go to library school and others, it's a job. But yeah, having them do some of the stuff you mentioned, like vetting, reading for readability, stuff like that. And they would be paid for it because, they only work on it when they're at work. So, but that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, I like that a lot. One of the things we worked on with the revision of the textbook was originally because the first edition of the textbook was created to use at our school. It had a lot of references to our school or the kinds of things we did at our school. So in the revision, we stripped all those out so it would be more universal for external things. So that would be a thing I would talk about with your students as they're working on modules, thinking about sure that you want it to be useful at your school, but they want to also think about kind of the language they're using, the structures they're using, so that if someone outside your school is watching it, they don't need to have access to your particular search engine. I'm sure you thought of that as well. I feel like I got a comment. I'm at the podium. Great. So we've got about 7 minutes left, I think. So I would want to take a moment to see if there's any questions I can answer or Kim can answer before we call it a day.
Hi, just wondering if did you actually include the 2 videos that you got with the book that's out there? Or are you waiting for the whole collection to do that?
Yeah, we're waiting for the whole collection. With the videos, the other thing that's getting in the way is the permissions. We're working with our copyright librarian and or the person who manages the permissions, and we want to make sure we have all the stuff in line before we put it out there. So yeah, those are I get to enjoy them, but I haven't released them for anyone else to see.
Hold on. There's people online.
Okay, if we had students go out and conduct interviews and collect content from random people, do we need to have those random people sign something that they agree that their voices and recordings can go on to the Open Commons?
My instinct is yes, that if
And
you're
is there a standardized permissions form, or can we create our own? And
I would talk to your librarian. Yeah.
okay. And if we're a nonprofit organization working in Africa, what do you recommend there?
I mean, if I were in that situation, I'd probably start with a governmental entity to say what are the rules regarding how we interact with folks, and then I would probably operate from the higher standard, right? So like if the place you're operating in says you can record people and you don't need to have them sign something, but the place you're from says you do need to have signed something, I would have them sign something, just so that you're kind of meeting the highest regard. But I mean, the first thing would be, if you have a local partner, talking to them about what are the community expectations, right? Because like if somebody not from where I was showed up and wanted me to sign papers, I don't know how I'd feel about that, right? So yeah, I think when you're sort of working in a different place than is your home culture, that's a whole nother set of things which is why it's really important to collaborate with the home community in which the text is being made. Yeah.
Rebecca has a couple questions online, and she says, I'm curious what guidance you ended up providing to students who reviewed the text, and then also what made you choose LibreText specifically?
I'll do the guidance and then I'll pass to Kim for the LibreText question. So with the students doing the revision, we had them doing the reviewing, we wrote up a series of questions for them to answer about each chapter. So they wrote about a page or a page and a half of text responses for each chapter that they read. They included things like, what did you think works best about this chapter? Is there anything that seems out of step or hard to understand? Did you note any specific moments in the text that were difficult to understand? What's the most relatable thing? We look for, sort of positives and negatives the way we would do in a lot of writing response. Kim, do you want to talk about how we worked with LibreText?
Sure. Our consortia, Carly, selected LibreText, so That's how that was done. But if it's something that that your institution already has an account with another organization, depending on if you're going through a grant or if you're being funded by your institution, that allows for a selection, but LibreText was selected for us, and they've been very helpful to us through the process.
I presume that all of the courses that you were working with students on were in person. I'm just wondering, most of my classes are online, and I have sometimes a lot of trouble getting students to do renewable assignments in online space. So I'm just wondering what thoughts maybe or any experiences that you might have had working with students like virtually.
Can you rearticulate the phrase renewable assignments? I'm not.
Well, essentially, what you're doing here with open pedagogy, having students create artifacts that live on beyond the course and are published with an open license.
Well, so my entire career I've been teaching at Columbia College Chicago, always working with students who don't want to take my class. And so, I mean, you know, often they come around, but so for me, it's about activating the space between what they're doing, what they want to do, and what we're doing, and finding a place for them to write about what they want or explore what they want. So it's very rarely that I'll assign a specific topic. In my experience in teaching strictly online courses, asynchronous is, I've never done an online synchronous except during COVID, but asynchronous, it was always about trying to find a way for them to do something in the computer and out in the world as well. So like when I would write, I taught a detective fiction course, I assigned students to go in their home area and pick out 3 locations that would be interesting in a mystery novel and take pictures of them and write about them a little bit as a way to sort of tie to where they are. Now, in terms of then creating the open thing, I think it's about, like I've had a lot of success with using local knowledge. So because we're in downtown Chicago, a perennial issue is students are new to Chicago. How do they survive? So I've often had students like build a wiki for next year's students about how to survive in Chicago. What are the 5 things you should know? What are the 5 best places you should go? And then using a wiki allows them to create things, and it's got built-in co-editing, and you can interlink between, and they end up making a collaborative text shared. So like my approach to your question, if we ran into each other in the hall, would be, how are you giving them room to write about what they want in the context of the work that they're doing? Yeah, there's one more. This is probably your last question. I'm gonna skip. There's my cats. There's our email addresses. So if you want to reach out after.
I'm feeling the pressure to make this a really good question then. I'm brand new to this world, but I do a lot of digital humanities. And so I'm wondering, where is the interface, or where is the overlap, or where are the distinctions really between doing an open, an OER source and doing something that I build with my students as a digital project that then gets shared? And I'm just wondering if you could articulate the philosophies behind those.
Well, I don't know that I'm much more experienced than you, but I will say, so my thinking is it's the open part that there was a really interesting panel I heard earlier, and I can't recall which one, but they were talking about it was about MOOCs. They were talking about when people make a massive online open course, open there means everybody can access it. Whereas open educational resources, open means everyone can redistribute it. So it's about your thinking about how the text is going to circulate once you're done with it. Are you setting it up in a way like with Creative Commons or something where you are pre-establishing that it will be able to move after you're done with it, and giving students informed consent about what they're doing when they create a text that way?
And with that, we're at time. I invite, if you have other questions, please talk to our fabulous presenters, but really quick, let's give them a round of applause. It's just fantastic.
Thank you very much, everybody.
And now
Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Bye, Kim.